The shuttle's engines hummed as Maya Torres pressed her face against the small window, watching Centauri Station grow larger with each passing moment. The massive space station rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its metal surfaces gleaming under the light of 3 different suns. Somewhere inside that enormous structure was the Galactic Naval Academy, the most prestigious military school in known space. Maya's stomach twisted with nervous energy. She was one of only 12 humans accepted into the academy this year, and she knew that meant she had a target on her back from day one. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic community, barely 50 years since first contact, and most alien species viewed them as unpredictable children playing with dangerous toys. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Maya gathered her single bag of belongings. She had packed light, bringing only the essentials and a small photo of her family back on Earth. As the airlock opened, she stepped into a world that would either make or break her dreams of becoming a naval officer. The station's corridors were filled with cadets from dozens of different species, all wearing the same gray uniforms but looking nothing alike. Tall, reptilian saurians moved with predatory grace, their scaled skin catching the artificial light. Groups of insectoid beings from the collective moved in perfect synchronization, their multiple arms gesturing in complex patterns that served as their form of communication. Near the transport hub, massive bear-like ursoids lumbered past, their thick fur making them appear even larger in the confined space. Maya noticed how the different species naturally grouped together, forming invisible hierarchies based on how long their civilizations had been traveling through space. The saurians and collective members occupied the center of walkways, while newer species pressed closer to the walls. Humans, she observed, seemed to hug the walls most of all. Finding her dormitory took longer than expected, mainly because the station signs were written in 17 different languages, and Maya was still learning to read Galactic Standard. When she finally located her room, she discovered she would be sharing it with 3 other cadets, a nervous aquaran whose skin had a blue-green tint, a small bird-like avian who kept preening her feathers, and a crystalline being whose body looked like living gemstone. None of them spoke to her directly. The aquaran, whose name was Tam, offered a polite nod before returning to organizing his belongings with mathematical precision. The avian, Pip, chirped something in her native language that Maya's translator rendered as a greeting, but the tone suggested mere politeness rather than friendliness. The crystalline being, Rex, simply hummed in harmonious tones while arranging crystals on his side of the room. Maya unpacked quickly and made her way to the first mandatory assembly. The Great Hall was enormous, with tiered seating that could accommodate thousands of cadets. As she looked for a place to sit, Maya noticed that the seating arrangement wasn't random. Saurians and collective members occupied the front rows, followed by other established spacefaring species in order of their technological advancement and military reputation. Humans were directed to seats near the back, along with other species that were considered barely worthy of admission. Commander Threx took the stage, his massive saurian frame commanding immediate attention. His black scales seemed to absorb light, and his yellow eyes swept across the assembled cadets with obvious disdain when they reached the back rows. His voice carried clearly through the hall's sound system, each word delivered with the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "Welcome to the Galactic Naval Academy," Threx began. "For 3 centuries, this institution has produced the finest officers in known space. We have maintained our reputation through discipline, adherence to proven doctrine, and respect for the natural order of things." Maya felt her jaw clench at the phrase, natural order. She had heard it before, usually from aliens who believed that some species were simply born to lead, while others were meant to follow. "You are here because your species has demonstrated some capacity for space warfare," Threx continued, his gaze lingering on the back rows. "However, acceptance into this academy does not guarantee graduation. Many of you will fail, not because you lack intelligence, but because you lack the evolutionary wisdom necessary for true command. After the assembly, cadets were divided into training groups. Maya found herself assigned to Group 7, which seemed to contain mostly species from the lower tiers of the galactic hierarchy. Their first instructor was a Saurian lieutenant named Corvus, who made his opinions clear from the beginning. "Humans," he said, reading from his assignment roster. "Your species thinks with emotions instead of logic. This makes you unpredictable and dangerous in command situations. You will need to work twice as hard as everyone else just to reach minimum competency." The training began immediately. Maya threw herself into every exercise with determination that bordered on desperation. When other cadets studied for 2 hours, she studied for 4. When they completed their physical training requirements, she pushed herself through additional sessions until her muscles screamed in protest. But no matter how hard she worked, it seemed like she could never do enough. When she scored perfectly on tactical examinations, instructors dismissed her success as memorization rather than understanding. When she completed obstacle courses faster than cadets from superior species, they claimed she had taken dangerous shortcuts that real officers would never risk. The other cadets began avoiding her. Even the humans in her class kept their distance, afraid that association with the most outspoken member of their species would hurt their own chances of success. Maya found herself eating meals alone, studying in empty rooms, and working out in the gymnasium during off hours when no one else was around. 3 weeks into the program, Maya's breaking point came during a tactical simulation exercise. She had been deliberately assigned to a team of failing cadets as punishment for questioning outdated doctrine during a strategy class. The simulation involved a routine patrol scenario where their small fleet would encounter hostile forces and need to respond appropriately. Her team leader was Corvus, the same Saurian who had made his disdain for humans clear from day one. As Maya watched him deploy their forces according to textbook formations that were older than human spaceflight, she realized that they were about to fail spectacularly. The enemy AI had been designed to test adaptability, but Corvus was following doctrine so rigidly that their defeat was inevitable. She tried to suggest alternative strategies, but Corvus cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Humans do not give tactical advice to their superiors," he snapped. "Your role is to follow orders, not to think." Maya watched in frustrated silence as their fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that had quickly adapted to their predictable tactics. When the simulation ended and the lights came up, she knew that this failure would be blamed on her presence disrupting the team's natural coordination. Commander Threx addressed the class with barely hidden satisfaction. "This exercise demonstrates why certain species should not be placed in positions where they can influence tactical decisions," he said, his yellow eyes fixed on Maya. "Chaos and unpredictability have no place in disciplined military operations." But Maya had been analyzing the simulation data on her personal tablet throughout the exercise. She had identified 17 separate moments where different tactics could have changed the outcome, 17 opportunities where human-style adaptability and innovation could have turned defeat into victory. As her classmates filed out of the simulation chamber, Maya remained in her seat, staring at the tactical data and feeling something crystallize inside her chest. It wasn't anger, exactly, though she was certainly angry. It was something harder and more dangerous. Absolute certainty that she was right and they were wrong. Tomorrow, she decided, she would prove it. Maya sat in the empty classroom long after her teammates had left, her tablet screen glowing with tactical analysis data that told a story completely different from what Commander Threx wanted everyone to believe. The numbers were clear, undeniable, and absolutely damning to everything the Academy taught about proper military doctrine. Her fingers moved across the screen, highlighting critical moments in the failed simulation. At 1432, when Corvus had ordered the standard defensive screen formation, the enemy AI had already repositioned 3 squadrons to exploit exactly that predictable response. At 1845, when their fleet had executed a textbook retreat maneuver, the AI had anticipated the move and laid a perfect trap. Every single tactical decision had been correct according to Academy doctrine, and every single decision had played directly into the enemy's hands. Maya's analysis showed something that made her blood boil with frustration. The AI wasn't just smarter than the Academy's teaching methods suggested. It was designed to punish rigid thinking and reward adaptability. The entire exercise was meant to demonstrate the limitations of following doctrine without creativity. But somehow the instructors had twisted the lesson to blame species they considered inferior rather than examining their own outdated methods. The classroom door hissed open, and Maya looked up to see Tam, her Aquaran roommate, standing in the doorway. His blue-green skin had taken on a darker hue, which Maya had learned indicated deep thought among his people. "I watched the simulation replay," Tam said quietly, his voice carrying the fluid tones that made Aquaran speech sound like underwater music. "Your analysis is correct. We lost because we were predictable." Maya felt a spark of hope. Someone else had seen what she saw. "The instructors won't admit that," she replied. "They'd rather blame human chaos than acknowledge that their precious doctrine has flaws." Tam moved closer, his large eyes studying the data on Maya's tablet. "My people have a saying, still water becomes stagnant, but flowing water stays clean. Your tactics flow like water. Ours are frozen in ice." Before Maya could respond, 2 more figures appeared in the doorway. Pip, the small avian, hopped into the room with her characteristic quick movements, followed by Rex, the massive Ursoid whose footsteps shook the floor despite his careful attempts to move quietly. "We heard you talking," Pip chirped, her translator rendering her rapid speech into clear standard. "About the simulation, about different tactics." Rex nodded slowly, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "My people see things others miss. We watch, we wait, we notice patterns." He gestured toward Maya's tablet. "The enemy learned our patterns, used them against us." Maya realized she was looking at 4 cadets from 4 different species, all ranked at the bottom of the Academy's hierarchy, all traditionally dismissed as inferior to the established powers. But as they gathered around her tablet, she saw something the instructors had missed completely. Each species brought unique perspectives that could complement each other in ways no textbook had ever considered. "What if we're approaching this?" "Wrong," Maya said, her mind racing with possibilities. "What if the problem isn't that we're inferior species, but that we're trying to fight like saurians and collective drones instead of fighting like ourselves?" The next morning brought Maya's chance to prove her theory. She had spent the night developing a presentation that challenged every fundamental assumption about galactic military doctrine. When she stood up in Commander Threx's strategy class, her 3 roommates had positioned themselves strategically around the room, ready to support her arguments with their own species' perspectives. "Commander," Maya said, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "Yesterday's simulation demonstrates a critical flaw in current tactical doctrine." The classroom fell silent. Cadets from higher-tier species turned in their seats, their expressions ranging from shock to amusement. No one challenged instructors directly, especially not humans. Commander Threx's yellow eyes narrowed. "Explain your concerns, Cadet Torres." Maya activated the room's holographic display, showing the previous day's battle replay. "The enemy AI adapted to our responses after the first engagement. Standard doctrine assumes enemies will fight like us, using predictable patterns based on established strategies. But what happens when the enemy learns and changes faster than our doctrine can adapt?" She highlighted the 17 critical moments she had identified. Here, here, and here. Each time we followed proper procedure, the AI countered with a response. It had learned from our previous moves. By the end of the engagement, it was predicting our actions 3 steps ahead. Corvus stood up, his scales flushing with anger. You suggest that proven doctrine, tested over centuries of warfare, is inferior to human improvisation? I suggest that any doctrine without adaptability is vulnerable to enemies who can learn, Maya replied. And I can prove it. The challenge hung in the air like a physical presence. Commander Threx studied Maya with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. Around the classroom, cadets held their breath, waiting to see how the instructor would respond to such unprecedented defiance. Very well, Cadet Torres, Threx said finally. Tomorrow you will demonstrate your theories in a live simulation. You will command a single destroyer against the same battle group that defeated your team yesterday. You will face this challenge alone, without support from your squad mates. Maya felt her stomach drop, but she kept her voice steady. And if I succeed? Threx's smile was cold and sharp. Then you will learn that success in simulation bears no resemblance to real combat. And you will discover that making your instructors appear incompetent carries consequences far worse than simple failure. That evening, Maya's roommates found her in the study lounge, surrounded by tactical manuals, simulation records, and probability calculations. She had been working for hours, developing something that had never been attempted in the Academy's long history, a completely adaptive battle strategy with no predetermined outcomes. You're going to get yourself expelled, Pip said, though her tone carried admiration rather than criticism. Maybe, Maya replied without looking up from her work. But if I'm going down, I'm taking their assumptions about human inferiority down with me. Tam leaned over her shoulder, studying her calculations. These probability matrices are fascinating. You're not planning specific moves. You're planning to plan. Exactly, Maya said. Instead of deciding what to do, I'm deciding how to decide. What to do? Every choice will depend on what the enemy does, but the enemy can't predict my choices because I haven't made them yet, Rex rumbled with what might have been laughter. Ursoids understand this. We don't plan the hunt. We adapt to the prey. Word of Maya's challenge spread through the Academy's underground communication networks faster than official announcements. By the next morning, cadets from species across the hierarchy had heard about the human who dared to challenge Saurian. Tactical doctrine. Some viewed her as a foolish upstart who would provide entertainment through her inevitable humiliation. Others saw her as something more dangerous. Proof that the established order might not be as unshakable as everyone believed. As Maya made her way to the simulation chamber, she passed groups of cadets who stopped their conversations to stare at her. Some whispered insults in their native languages, assuming she couldn't understand. Others offered subtle gestures of support, quickly hidden when instructors were nearby. At the chamber entrance, Commander Threx waited with several other high-ranking officers, their expressions making it clear that they viewed the coming simulation as an execution rather than a test. Maya took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked past them into the chamber that would either validate everything she believed about human potential or destroy her dreams forever. The simulation chamber door sealed behind her with a final ominous click. The simulation chamber felt different when Maya entered alone. The walls curved around her like the inside of an enormous egg, covered with holographic projectors that could create any environment imaginable. Today, they would generate the cold emptiness of deep space, populated with enemy ships designed to destroy her single destroyer, using tactics that had evolved beyond anything the Academy taught. Maya settled into the command chair and felt the neural interface activate, connecting her directly to the ship's systems. Around her, holographic displays flickered to life, showing her vessel's status, enemy positions, and tactical options. The destroyer was a good ship, fast and well-armed, but it was still just one ship facing 12 vessels that had already proven they could adapt to conventional strategy. Through the chamber's observation windows, Maya could see the entire Academy gathering to watch her attempt. Hundreds of cadets pressed against the glass, their alien faces reflecting a mixture of anticipation and skepticism. The instructors sat in elevated positions, their expressions ranging from Commander Threx's cold satisfaction to other officers' barely concealed curiosity about whether the human would provide an interesting spectacle before her inevitable defeat. Maya's roommates had managed to secure positions near the front of the observation area. Tam's skin had shifted to the deep blue-green that indicated intense focus among his people. Pip was preening nervously, her feathers ruffled with anxiety. Rex stood like a living mountain, his small eyes fixed on Maya with unwavering attention. "Begin simulation," Commander Threx's voice echoed through the chamber. The holographic displays immediately showed Maya's destroyer materializing in space, facing a battle group that included everything from fast attack craft to heavily armored dreadnoughts. The enemy fleet was arranged in a classic formation that any Academy textbook would identify as nearly impregnable when facing a single opponent. Maya had approximately 30 seconds before the enemy vessels would complete their sensor sweeps and begin their attack. What happened next defied every principle. The Academy had taught about space combat. Instead of following any standard opening maneuver, Maya immediately fired her engines at maximum power in a completely random direction, not toward the enemy or away from them, but at an angle that served no tactical purpose anyone could identify. Her ship accelerated into a spiraling pattern that made her trajectory impossible to predict, violating safety protocols about engine stress in the process. In the observation area, cadets began muttering, in confusion. Even her supporters looked concerned. Maya appeared to be flying like someone who had never operated a spacecraft before. But Maya's seemingly chaotic movement had a purpose that became clear when the enemy AI tried to target her. The targeting systems, designed to predict ship movements, based on logical tactical choices, couldn't lock onto a vessel that was moving for no logical reason. Maya's random spiral had turned her ship into a target that conventional weapons systems couldn't track effectively. As enemy fire began filling the space around her, Maya made her next unpredictable move. She shut down her ship's engines completely, letting momentum carry her forward while she diverted all power to weapons and shields. The sudden change in acceleration caught the enemy AI off guard again, causing several volleys to pass harmlessly through space where her ship should have been if she had continued her previous movement pattern. Maya opened a communication channel to her simulated crew, but instead of issuing formal military commands, she began talking to them like friends having a casual conversation. "Communications, that big ugly ship on our port side looks lonely," she said, highlighting an enemy dreadnought on her tactical display. "Think we should go say hello?" Her simulated communications officer, programmed to respond to standard commands, somehow understood that this meant to prepare jamming equipment while maneuvering toward the designated target. The informal language carried emotional context and implied priorities that formal commands couldn't convey, confusing the AI that was monitoring communications to predict her next moves. Maya's destroyer dove toward the enemy dreadnought at an angle that seemed suicidal. Every tactical manual said that small ships should never engage larger vessels in direct combat. But just before impact, Maya fired her weapons not at the dreadnought's armored hull, but at the smaller escort ships positioned nearby. The explosions created a debris field that served as both concealment and additional obstacles for the remaining enemy vessels. Engineering? Remember that trick we talked about with the plasma conduits? Maya continued her casual conversation while executing maneuvers that pushed her ship beyond recommended performance limits. Now might be a good time to try it. Her simulated engineering chief understood that this meant to reroute plasma flow in ways that would create an energy signature completely different from standard destroyer profiles. To enemy sensors, Maya's ship suddenly looked like something else entirely, adding another layer of unpredictability to targeting solutions that were already struggling to track her erratic movement patterns. The battle continued for 37 minutes, and every moment brought new examples of Maya's revolutionary approach to space combat. She used debris fields as cover and concealment. She fired at empty space to create obstacles that forced enemy ships into predictable positions. She combined her ship systems in ways that technical manuals said were impossible, but somehow worked in practice. Most importantly, she never repeated a tactic. Every attack was different from the last. Every evasive maneuver broke pattern, just as the enemy AI began to adapt. Where conventional strategy relied on proven methods and predictable responses, Maya created a completely fluid approach that changed faster than any learning system could follow. The enemy fleet, designed to counter known tactics through adaptive learning, found itself facing strategies that had never existed before and might never exist again. Ships that should have been able to coordinate their attacks found themselves confused by targeting data that made no sense. Weapon systems calibrated for conventional warfare struggled to engage a target that seemed to operate outside the laws of physics and logic. Maya's destroyer emerged from the engagement damaged but victorious, surrounded by the wreckage of 12 enemy vessels that had been destroyed by tactics no military academy in the galaxy had ever taught. The simulation chamber fell silent, not the quiet of concentration or polite attention, but the absolute silence of minds, trying to process something that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. Then, slowly, a single pair of hands began clapping. Tam had started, applauding, his Aquaran features showing wonder and admiration. Pip joined him, her chirping calls of approval cutting through the silence. Rex's deep voice rumbled with approval. Within moments, the entire observation area erupted in cheers. Cadets from species across the hierarchy were on their feet, shouting approval in dozens of different languages. Even some of the mid-tier species cadets who had never spoken to Maya before were applauding with genuine enthusiasm. But the instructors remained seated, their expressions frozen between shock and something that might have been fear. Commander. Threx's voice cut through the celebration like a blade through silk. An interesting display, Cadet Torres, he said, his words carefully controlled. However, victory in simulation bears no resemblance to real combat conditions. Report to Detention Block C immediately. You will remain there while we determine appropriate consequences for your creative interpretation of regulations and safety protocols. Maya rose from the command chair, her legs shaky from adrenaline and exhaustion. Through the observation windows, she could see her roommates trying to push through the crowd to reach her, but security personnel were already clearing the area. As she was escorted from the simulation chamber, Maya caught sight of one more face in the crowd. Fleet Admiral Kine, the Academy's highest-ranking officer, whose ancient saurian features showed an expression Maya couldn't quite interpret. The Admiral's eyes met hers for just a moment, and something passed between them that felt like recognition. Maya was led away to detention, knowing that she had proven her point about human tactical capabilities, but uncertain whether anyone in authority would be willing to acknowledge what they had witnessed. The victory felt hollow when it led to punishment rather than recognition. But in the observation area, conversations were starting among cadets who had never questioned the established order before. Seeds of doubt about the rigid hierarchy were beginning to sprout, and questions were being asked about whether other species might have untapped potential that the Academy's traditional methods had never recognized. Detention Block C was designed to break spirits through carefully calculated misery. Maya's cell was exactly 3 meters by 3 meters, with walls painted in a shade of gray that seemed to absorb hope along with light. The only furniture was a narrow bunk and a small desk, both bolted to the floor to prevent any possibility of rearrangement or personalization. The daily routine was mind-numbing by design. Maya woke each morning to clean floors that weren't dirty, organize supply closets that had been deliberately messed up overnight, and scrub walls that would be marked with artificial stains before her next shift. The work served no purpose except to demonstrate her powerlessness and waste her time in ways that felt both meaningless and endless. But the instructors had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that isolating Maya would stop the ideas she had planted from spreading through the academy. They were wrong. 3 days into her detention, Maya received her first unauthorized visitor. Tam had somehow slipped past the guards during shift change, using his natural ability to move silently through water-filled maintenance conduits that most species couldn't navigate. "I've been thinking about your battle," Tam said quietly, his skin shifting to the pale green that indicated excitement among aquarans. "The way you used debris fields made the environment work for you instead of against you. My people understand fluid dynamics, but you made space itself fluid." Maya looked up from the meaningless paperwork she'd been assigned to complete. "Your species has instincts about flow and pressure that could revolutionize three-dimensional combat," she replied. "But the Academy teaches you to fight like saurians instead of like aquarans. What if we learn to fight like ourselves?" Tam asked, echoing the question that had started everything. More visitors followed. Pip arrived the next day, having flown through ventilation shafts that were too small for most species to navigate. Her natural understanding of three-dimensional movement had been dismissed by instructors who focused on two-dimensional tactical displays, but Maya helped her see how flight instincts could translate into superior space maneuvering. Rex came. During Maya's recreation period, his massive frame making stealth impossible, but his gentle nature earning sympathy from guards who looked the other way. His species' reputation for slowness and limited intelligence was completely wrong, Maya realized. Ursoids had incredible patience and observational skills that made them natural strategic thinkers when given time to analyze situations properly. Each visitor brought friends. Within 2 weeks, Maya's tiny recreation periods had become informal. Gatherings where cadets from the Academy's lowest-ranked species shared ideas they had never been encouraged to express. They talked about their natural abilities, their unique perspectives, and their frustrations with training methods that ignored everything that made them different. Maya began teaching them not just human tactics, but how to recognize and develop their own species' strengths. She showed aquarans how to apply fluid dynamics to energy weapon dispersal patterns. She helped avians translate their flight instincts into spacecraft maneuvering techniques. She worked with ursoids to develop patience-based strategies that use time as a weapon rather than rushing toward immediate objectives. More importantly, she showed them how to combine their different abilities in ways the Academy had never considered. An aquaran's understanding of pressure dynamics could complement an avian's three-dimensional thinking. An ursoid's strategic patience could provide the foundation for an aquaran's adaptive tactics. Word spread through unofficial channels that connected the Academy's lower-tier species. Study groups formed in empty classrooms during off hours. Training sessions took place in forgotten storage areas. For the first time in the Academy's history, cadets who had been taught to see themselves as inferior began working together instead of competing for the approval of species that considered them naturally limited. The changes became impossible to hide. Grades improved dramatically among cadets who had always struggled with conventional teaching methods. Physical training scores increased as species learned to use their natural abilities instead of trying to match arbitrary standards designed for different body types. Most tellingly, tactical exercises began showing creativity and innovation that made instructors uncomfortable. Commander Threx noticed the shift and responded by extending Maya's detention indefinitely. He also issued new regulations forbidding unauthorized gatherings and restricting access to areas where informal study groups had been meeting. But the revolution had already grown beyond his ability to contain it. The proof came during the semester's most important examination, a complex multi-fleet engagement that traditionally showcased the superiority of high-tier species while relegating lower-tier cadets to support roles. The exercise was designed to be unwinnable for anyone except the most advanced students, serving as a clear demonstration of why some species were natural leaders while others were meant to follow. This year, something unprecedented happened. The lower-tier cadets coordinated their own strategy without waiting for orders from their supposed superiors. Instead of accepting support roles, they took initiative based on their unique capabilities and the tactical principles Maya had taught them. They didn't win. The exercise was mathematically designed to prevent that outcome. But they performed so far beyond expectations that even the instructors couldn't deny the implications. Aquaran cadets executed maneuvers that surprised their Saurian team leaders. Ursoids demonstrated strategic thinking that made their traditionally quick-thinking superiors reconsider their assumptions about intelligence and reaction time. Most disturbing for the established hierarchy, the lower-tier cadets showed clear evidence of coordinated planning and tactical innovation that bore unmistakable resemblance to Maya's approach. Their strategies were adaptive, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective within their limitations. After the exercise, emergency meetings were held among senior instructors. The performance of species that should have failed had implications that reached far beyond academy training. If these cadets could exceed expectations so dramatically, what did that say about the entire system that had kept them in subordinate positions for centuries? Commander Threx's solution was predictable. Tighter restrictions, harsher punishments, and absolute prohibition on any deviation from established doctrine. But other instructors were beginning to ask different questions. What if the Academy's methods weren't just inefficient, but actively harmful? What if they were wasting the potential of entire species because of outdated assumptions about natural hierarchy? The debate might have continued indefinitely, but Maya's detention was about to receive a visitor who would change everything. That evening, as she sat in her cell reviewing the mathematical proofs she had developed to support adaptive tactics, the security system chimed to announce an authorized visit. Maya expected to see another sympathetic guard, or perhaps one of her roommates, who had found a new way to bypass security. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with Fleet Admiral Kine, the Academy's highest-ranking officer and one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. The Admiral's ancient features were unreadable as she studied Maya through the cell's energy barrier. Her scales had the worn, smooth appearance that came from centuries of service, and her eyes held depths of experience that made Maya feel very young and very small. "Cadet Torres," Admiral Kine said, her voice carrying authority that made the detention cell feel like a formal meeting room. "We need to talk." Maya stood at attention, unsure whether she was about to receive commendation or final judgment. The Admiral's expression gave no indication which way the conversation might go, but Maya sensed that whatever happened next would determine not just her own future, but the future of every cadet who had dared to believe that different didn't mean inferior. The revolution that had started in a detention cell was about to face its ultimate test. Fleet Admiral Kine deactivated the cell's energy barrier and stepped inside, her presence transforming the cramped detention space into something that felt almost dignified. She moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had survived centuries of war, but her mind remained sharp as the blade she had once carried into battle against enemies that most current cadets knew only from history books. "Do you know why this academy exists, Cadet Torres?" the Admiral asked, settling carefully onto the cell's single chair while Maya remained standing at attention. "To train naval officers, sir," Maya replied, falling back on the formal responses that detention had not managed to break out of her. "No." Kine's response was immediate and definitive. "That's what we tell people, but it's not why we're really here. This academy exists because 17 different species learned to fight together during the Void Wars 3 centuries ago. Before that alliance, we were all dying separately." The Admiral activated a small holographic projector, filling the tiny cell with images Maya had only seen in history textbooks. Ships from dozens of different civilizations fought against an enemy that seemed to shift and change with every engagement, adapting faster than any single species could counter. "The enemy we faced then was more dangerous than anything you've encountered in simulation," Admiral Kine continued. They learned from every battle, adapted to every strategy, and seemed to understand our weaknesses better than we understood them ourselves. Sound familiar? Maya felt a chill of recognition. The simulation AI. Designed based on historical records from the Void Wars, Kine confirmed. We created that AI to test whether our current training methods would be effective against the kind of adaptive enemy that once nearly destroyed us all. The holographic display shifted to show the climactic battles that had ended the war. Maya watched in fascination as fleets from different species coordinated attacks that seemed impossible. Saurian tactical precision combined with Aquaran fluid dynamics. Collective computational power merged with Ursoid patience and avian three-dimensional thinking. Every species contributed something unique, and the combination had been unstoppable. We won because we learned to think as one mind with many perspectives, Admiral Kine said. But over the centuries, we forgot that lesson. We became comfortable with hierarchy, with tradition, with the belief that some ways of thinking are inherently superior to others. Maya remained silent, sensing that the Admiral was building towards something profound. Today, I reviewed the final examination results, Kine continued, her ancient eyes studying Maya with intensity that made her feel exposed. I saw cadets who were destined for support roles demonstrate tactical innovation that would have changed the outcome of battles I fought as a young officer. I saw species that we have marginalized for generations prove that our assumptions about their capabilities were not just wrong, but dangerously limiting. The Admiral stood and began pacing the small cell, her movements careful but purposeful. But most importantly, I saw what happens when someone refuses to accept that limitations define possibilities. Your victory in that simulation wasn't just tactical brilliance, Torres. It was proof that our entire approach to military education is fundamentally flawed. Maya's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. What are you saying, sir? I'm saying that effective immediately. You are no longer a cadet. Admiral Kine's words hit like a physical blow, and Maya's chest tightened with the certainty that she was about to be expelled. But the Admiral continued. You are now Lieutenant Torres, the youngest officer in Academy history to receive a field promotion. More importantly, you are the new Director of Tactical Innovation, with full authority to restructure how we train future officers. The words seemed impossible to process. Maya stared at the Admiral, waiting for some indication that this was an elaborate test or cruel joke. Sir, I don't understand. Commander Threx and his instructional staff represent the old way of thinking, Admiral Kine explained. They have served well, but they cannot adapt to what our military needs to become. The galaxy is changing, Torres. New threats are emerging that require new ways of thinking. We cannot face adaptive enemies with rigid doctrine. The Admiral's expression grew serious. Your detention wasn't punishment. It was preparation. We needed to see if you could inspire change even when stripped of official authority. The underground revolution you started proves that you understand something our traditional leaders have forgotten. True strength comes from recognizing potential in unexpected places. Maya's mind struggled to accept what she was hearing. The other cadets, the ones who worked with me, will continue their education under new protocols. Protocols that emphasize adaptability over adherence to doctrine. Cross-species tactical development over hierarchical specialization. Innovation over tradition. Admiral Kine moved to the cell door, preparing to leave. But understand this, Lieutenant. You will face resistance. Many officers, many species, have built their entire identities around the current system. They will see your promotion as a threat to everything they believe. How do I handle that, sir? The Admiral's weathered features cracked into the first smile Maya had seen from her. The same way you handled that simulation. With innovation, determination, and by proving that different doesn't mean inferior. It means necessary. The transformation began immediately. Within days of her promotion, Maya found herself with resources she had never imagined. The Academy's computer systems opened to reveal centuries of tactical data, battle records, and strategic analyses. More importantly, she gained access to instructors and officers who had been waiting for someone with authority to challenge the established order. Her first major change eliminated the species-based hierarchy that had defined cadet assignments for centuries. Instead of placing Saurians and collective members automatically in command positions, Maya implemented aptitude-based selection that evaluated innovation, adaptability, and cross-species cooperation skills. The resistance was immediate and fierce. Senior instructors complained that humans were unfit to make decisions about galactic military education. Traditional species accused Maya of favoring lower-tier cadets out of spite rather than merit. Some threatened to resign rather than work under her new protocols. Maya's response was characteristically direct. She challenged every complaining instructor to face the same simulation that had launched her career. Those who succeeded earned positions in her new system based on their demonstrated abilities. Those who failed were reassigned to positions where rigid thinking might still be useful, but where they couldn't limit other species' potential. The results spoke for themselves. Training exercises became more creative and effective as cadets learned to combine their species' natural abilities instead of suppressing them. Graduation rates increased dramatically across all species, but especially among those who had been marginalized under the old system. Most importantly, the Academy began producing officers who saw diversity not as a challenge to overcome, but as a strategic advantage to leverage. Maya's first graduating class included Tam as the Academy's first Aquaran fleet commander, his fluid thinking having proven superior to traditional rigid tactics. Pip became the youngest avian to earn tactical specialization, her three-dimensional instincts revolutionizing fighter squadron coordination. Rex pioneered new approaches to siege warfare that used Ursoid patience and observational skills to achieve victories that quick-strike methods had never accomplished. Even some traditional species thrived under the new system. Saurian and collective cadets who had been struggling with increasingly adaptive enemies found that their species' strengths became even more powerful when combined with other perspectives rather than standing alone. Commander Threx, initially the most vocal opponent of Maya's changes, eventually became one of her most valuable allies. The breakthrough came when he realized that his own tactical expertise was enhanced rather than diminished by working with officers who thought differently than he did. "I spent centuries believing that strength meant dominance," Threx admitted during one of their planning sessions. "You taught me that true strength means helping others achieve their potential so we can all become more than we could alone." A year after Maya's promotion, Fleet Admiral Kine addressed the Academy's newest graduating class. The group was the most diverse, innovative, and capable collection of officers in the institution's history. Representatives from species that had never held command positions stood alongside traditional leaders, all united by training that emphasized adaptation and cooperation over hierarchy and rigid doctrine. Maya stood at the side of the Great Hall, watching cadets who had once been considered inferior receive commissions as fleet commanders, tactical specialists, and strategic advisors. The transformation had been so complete that new cadets arriving at the Academy couldn't imagine the old system of species-based limitations. "The galaxy is vast and full of unknown threats," Admiral Kine told the graduates. "But you are prepared for that uncertainty in ways no previous class has been. You have learned not just to follow established paths, but to create new ones when circumstances demand innovation." As the ceremony concluded and the new officers prepared for their assignments throughout the galaxy, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from an unwanted human cadet to the architect of a completely new approach to military education. The academy that had once tried to break her spirit had become something unprecedented, a place where being different wasn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to celebrate. Every species, every perspective, every unique way of thinking had value when properly understood and applied. The revolution that had started in a detention cell had transformed not just one institution, but the entire concept of what military leadership could become. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, adaptive enemies that had once seemed unbeatable were about to face officers trained not to repeat the past, but to create the future. Maya smiled as she watched her former roommates receive their new assignments. Tam would command a deep space exploration fleet, using Aquaran adaptability to navigate unknown dangers. Pip would lead fighter squadrons whose three-dimensional tactics would revolutionize space combat. Rex would oversee strategic planning for long-term campaigns that required patience and careful observation. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you stopped limiting potential and started unleashing it instead.